hello and welcome to the June edition of Bright Side of the Road. And right now, the Irish Cultural Centre at Hammersmith is so full that we can't get in. We're here at the Duke of Cornwall, round the corner on Fulham Palace Road. We carry on with the literary theme, and we're going to be talking a little bit about the great Irish writer, George Bernard Shaw. And we're delighted to welcome to the Duke of Cornwall, Eoin O'Callaghan from the George Bernard Shaw Society. Welcome.
Thank you for having us.
And the great actor Alan Cox, who has performed in a number of GBS plays. Welcome.
Thank you. Yes, I have.
Owen, just in case there's someone out there who doesn't know who George Bernard Shaw was, tell us a little bit about George.
Well, I mean, the thing with George Bernard Shaw is where do you start, because he's such a giant, and often people can find him quite intimidating. But, he was born in Dublin in 1856, moved to the UK when he was 20 years of age, and then lived a very long life here until 1950 when he died at the age of 94. And he's most famous really as a playwright who really kind of changed the shape of British theatre really by bringing issues onto the stage. That's probably what he's most famous for. Kind of up until really before him, theatre was about entertainment, and he started to kind of put issues on there and use the theatre to shine a light on things that hadn't up to that point had a light shone on them.
And Alan, you've performed in a number of George Bernard Shaw plays. I mean, probably the most famous is My Fair Lady.
Well, yes, I mean, his play was Pygmalion.
Yeah.
And My Fair Lady, I think, has about... Alan J. Lerner, who wrote the musical, said that about 60% of Bernard Shaw's play makes it into My Fair Lady. And it was written in 1956, I think, so it was 6 years after Shaw had died. He was a little covetous over the play, and he said there's quite enough music in my language for there to be a need for someone to write music around it. But I think his legacy has done very nicely, thank you, because of My Fair Lady, as has RADA, the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, was bequeathed, I think, 70% of the royalties of Shaw's estate.
Amazing.
And
so My Fair Lady contributed.
Well, absolutely. There was a controversy. Eoin and I were talking about this, that his name, there's the George Bernard Shaw Theatre at RADA, and a couple of years ago there was a move afoot to get his name taken off the theatre because it was felt that he was that he peddled some rather views that people thought were worthy of him being cancelled, whereas he was a great provocateur, and he believed that the theatre was a place to explore and debate ideas. I think the rights ran out of the bequest
in 2020.
RADA. So unfortunately, yes, they have every right to get rid of Bernard Shaw, and they probably should, because they're not going to get his money anymore.
Well, we'd argue differently, obviously.
He was a slightly frightening man, wasn't he?
Well,
intimidating, should we say?
Well, he was, because he had this great intellect, and actually, even for even students, I was at a conference in Dublin 2 weeks ago, and one of the topics of discussion at the end was how intimidating he is, because he is this great persona. And to take up what Alan was saying, he was quite controversial, and I don't think you can shy away from that. You have to be prepared to be open about everything that he spoke about and all the ideas he brought to the table, and there are so many of them. And not shy away from, I guess, engaging with the ideas that he brought up.
Yeah, I was also in a play of his called John Bull's Other Island, which was the play he was writing about the Irish question in 1904, the Irish question. And the question being, when is Ireland going to get home rule? And there's this extraordinary speech at the end between this Irish-loving Englishman and this Gladstoneized Irishman and this Father Peter Keegan, who's lost his faith. And it operates on the kind of comedic level, and then a socialist utopian level, and then on this broader philosophic poetic level. So if you think about Shaw's thought as being binary. There's actually usually a synthesis between opposing points of view, which is where a lot of the comedy resides.
It's funny you mentioned, the possible cancellation of George Bernard Shaw, because he was working at a time, and indeed created that time in theatre, where nuance and the grey area was celebrated, and we're nowadays turning our backs on that a little bit, aren't we? That you can't even have a character express views which are unpleasant or unpalatable, because somehow the author is blamed for the views of a character whose role is to provoke.
Well,
Exactly.
Shaw was a Victorian, an Edwardian, and a Georgian. So it's kind of synonymous with like boomers and Gen X and Gen Y and Gen. It's absolutely right that generations should question the world that they're inheriting. And Shaw, who lived to the age of 94, spanned all these generations and liked winding people up and liked making people laugh.
I wanted to ask her, when World War I started, he just said, this is nonsense. And all these people saying, you'll all be home before Christmas. He said no. And he was totally obliterated by all his contemporaries and said, not a patriot, and literally was sent into intellectual exile. And it wasn't until the war went on, and the bodies started to pile up, that people realised he was right.
Yeah, I mean, he had an eye on the economics of it. Being a student of Marx, he realised that the military-industrial complex was benefiting from World War I, and that the narrative about the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand by the Serbian nationalist being the trigger for World War I, he questioned that, and he was talking about bringing up the question about neutrality in Belgium, and the fact that Germany and England were fighting over this like a Solomon's baby, and that it benefited the war chest that this war took place. And as you say, the kind of nationalistic Englishers tore strips off him. And then he emerged, the theatre had a place for his play Heartbreak House, which his kind of Chekhovian take on the crumbling edifices of England in particular. And then he wrote St. Joan, which was kind of about the spirit of survival despite the oppressive patriarchal forces. And then this wild thing, which was Back to Methuselah.
Yeah, I mean, his response to the war, that was really his response to World War I. Back to Methuselah, where one of the ideas was if people could just live longer, they would if they had, say, 300-year lives, they would learn like people who live our length of lives, 75 years, don't get to learn from their past. Life is over before you can really prevent the mistakes. So it's incredible ideas, and that play spanned in time from the Garden of Eden to 40,000 AD in the future. So he really was a visionary. Of course, that play to put on would run for about 8 hours, so
Right,
it
wow.
very rarely gets put on. But I've heard rumours that someone is trying to put it on in London, so fingers crossed for that.
Fingers crossed. Alan, you're going to grace us with a couple of recitations from GBS. What have you chosen?
I thought I'd do a passage from Man and Superman, which was a play he wrote. It was part of, there was a theatre season between 1904 and 1907 at the Royal Court. The Royal Court in London has always been a place of progressive thinking. And interestingly enough, I found a quote from John Osborne, who wrote Look Back in Anger. And in 1956, that was supposed to be the birth of the protest theatre after World War II. And the folk around at those times kind of turned their sights on Shaw, against Shaw. Shaw had died in 1950, and the angry young men of the late 50s kind of said, we need to clear the decks and do a new social, progressive, philosophical thing. slightly discounting the fact that he'd been doing it. But John Osborne's great thing is we need to put emotion at the centre of it. He thought, and some of his fellows thought, that Shaw was a bit of a dry stick. And in fact, Osborne said, Shaw sounds like a giddy spinster or a eunuch who has slipped into something unsuitable when he strives after emotion. Shaw avoided passion almost as prudently as Noel Coward. Frigidity and caution demand an evasive style, and they both perfected one. Thrown slippers seem the exactly right common comeuppance for a cold, pedantic heart. Remembering the bit in My Fair Lady where Eliza throws the slippers at Higgins. So this passage I've chosen is from Man and Superman, which premiered at the Royal Court back in 1904. And there's a fantasy sequence set in hell, which happens to be in the Sierra Nevada desert. And the central character of Man and Superman, the main play, Jack Tanner, is modelled after Don Juan. And in Shaw's topsy-turvy universe, he's not the conscienceless seducer. His notion is that Don Juan is always being pursued by women who want him in order to sire children with. So Don Juan, in this section, finds himself in hell, and the devil basically wants Don Juan to go to heaven and not stick around in hell. And in the process of chucking him out, they have this little conversation. So the devil says, Don Juan, shall I be frank with you? Don Juan says, were you not so before? The devil, as far as I went, yes. But I will now go further and confess to you that men get tired of everything, of heaven no less than of hell, and that all history is nothing but a record of the oscillations of the world between these two extremes. An epoch is but a swing of the pendulum, and each generation thinks the world is progressing because it is always moving. But when you are as old as I am, when you have 1,000 times wearied of heaven, like myself and the Commander, and 1,000 times wearied of hell, as you are wearied now, you will no longer imagine that every swing from heaven to hell is an emancipation. Every swing from hell to heaven, an evolution. Where you now see reform, progress, fulfillment of upward tendency, continual ascent by man on the stepping stones of his dead selves to higher things, you will see nothing but an infinite comedy of illusion. You will discover the profound truth of the saying of my friend Coeleth, that there is nothing new under the sun. Vanitas vanitatum. And then Don Juan says, by heaven, this is worse than your cant about love and beauty. Clever dolt that you are, is a man no better than a worm, or a dog than a wolf, because he gets tired of everything? Shall he give up eating because he destroys his appetite in the act of gratifying it? Is a field idle when it is fallow? Can the Commander expend his hellish energy here without accumulating heavenly energy for his next term of blessedness? Granted that the life force has hit on the device of the clockmaker's pendulum and uses the earth for its bob, that the history of each oscillation, which seems so novel to us, the actors, is but the history of the last oscillation repeated. Nay, more, that in the unthinkable infinitude of time, the sun throws off the earth and catches it again 1,000 times as a circus rider throws up a ball, and that our age-long epochs are but the moments between the toss and the catch. Has the colossal mechanism no purpose? And the devil says, none, my friend. You think because you have a purpose, nature must have one. You might as well expect it to have fingers and toes because you have them. And then Don Juan says, but I should not have them if they served no purpose. And I, my friend, am as much a part of nature as my own finger is a part of me. If my finger is the organ by which I grasp the sword and the mandolin, my brain is the organ by which nature strives to understand itself. My dog's brain serves only my dog's purpose, but my own brain labours at a knowledge which does nothing for me personally, but make my body bitter to me, and my decay and death a calamity. Were I not possessed with a purpose beyond my own, I had better be a ploughman than a philosopher. For the ploughman lives as long as the philosopher, eats more, sleeps better, and rejoices in the wife of his bosom with less misgiving. This is because the philosopher is in the grip of the life force. This life force says to him, I have done 1,000 wonderful things unconsciously by merely willing to live and following the line of least resistance. Now I want to know myself and my destination, and I choose my path. So I've made a special brain, a philosopher's brain, to grasp this knowledge for me as the husbandman's hand grasps the plough for me. And this, says the life force to the philosopher, thou must strive to do for me until thou diest, when I will make another brain and another philosopher to carry on the work. And the devil says, what is the use of knowing? And Don Juan answers, why, to be able to choose the line of greatest advantage instead of yielding in the direction of the least resistance. Does a ship sail to its destination no better than a log drifts no whither? The philosopher is nature's pilot. And there you have our difference. To be in hell is to drift. To be in heaven is to steer.
Just looking at even the text, it's not like other plays where you see gaps. And as an actor, and you told me earlier your daddy Brian Cox, he also had a big relationship, and Shaw was big in your house.
Yeah.
But what is it, as opposed to directors or audiences, what actors seem to love saying his words? You were enjoying yourself there to high heaven, and your dad, I think, produced. Did you say he produced some shows? And
he directed a few shows.
Yeah.
Well, he's a kind of household god. I mean, neither my dad nor I went to university. We went to drama school, and the theatre has been our open and extended and continuing university, asylum, an open unity asylum. So yes, so that, and when you learn these great texts, you kind of think, oh my God, this is smart. Words are smarter than people.
Oh, absolutely, I agree.
What's your favourite, Alan? What's your favourite Shaw play?
Well, I loved doing My Fair Lady last year. I mean, as I said, it's very wordy stuff, but I imagine it's like playing music. Like when you run it at pace, something begins to kind of kick in, and you go, "Wow, this is wild," and particularly like when we were doing My Fair Lady. I think there's no accident why it's endured, because the songs within it feel like they come out of the center of the play.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I've always had an affection for Man and Superman because it feels like a manifesto of progress.
Wow.
Owen, tell us a tiny bit more about the GBS Society. Can people join? What have you got a website?
Yeah, well, we're out there. Our website is shawsociety.org.uk, and you can see about all our range of activities. We publish a magazine twice a year. We run play readings. We have a very active theatre group that visits the London theatre, not just of Shaw when it's on, but of his contemporaries as well. And there's always something of his contemporaries on. And we're now starting to get into supporting young actors and academics studying Shaw. And one of our main areas of activity is to try to sponsor Shaw's work on stage. So, our mission is sharing and showing Shaw. So we're trying to share Shaw with the wider public and our members as well, of course. And this summer we're sponsoring. We have a very long-standing tradition of putting on or supporting at Shaw's Corner, his home north of London, Shaw's home for 44 4 years, birthday performances of his plays. And this year we're sponsoring Mrs. Warren's Profession, which is being put on by a Shawvian theatre company, an award-winning company called Shaw 2020. So they're going on tour. I can give you the dates if you like. They're going on tour. They're in the Broccoli Jack Theatre in South East London from July 16th to Saturday the 20th of July. Then they go to Shaw's Corner for the birthday weekend on Friday the 26th and Saturday the 27th. And then on the 28th, they're in Campus West in Welwyn Garden City. And then they finish their run then with 3 nights at the Tabard Theatre in Chiswick, just down the road from here, on Wednesday the 7th to Friday the 9th of July. And if I may mention one quick thing, we're having a fundraiser. The performances at Shaw's Corner are open air. And we're having a fundraiser on the Saturday the 27th of July, where one of our vice presidents, Dame Shan Phillips, in advance of that will be talking about her life as a Shawvian actress, her experiences acting in some of Shaw's great plays.
Very good. Well, you know something? That we must be near the end of the show, or if not, we're over. But if I may say to the guests who are listening, that the next bit may not be in the show because it may not make it because it's too long. But I insist that the great Alan Cox gives us one more reading of anything he would like.
Yeah,
and then we can go home.
And
you said it's Shaw's birthday. Which birthday? It's 100th, isn't it? It's centenary, is it?
No, well, actually, funnily enough, so his birthday, I think he will be 168 this year, I think.
Right, okay.
So it's not a particular milestone birthday. But it happens that the performance on the 27th of July is on the exact date of the 99th anniversary of the first ever public performance in the UK of Mrs. Warren's Profession, because it was banned, of course, for about 30 years.
That's
so it had been performed to private theatre clubs, but not publicly. So 27th of July, 99th anniversary, first ever performance.
And the ICC is going to be working in partnership with the George Bernard Shaw Society from later in the year and next year.
Well, we haven't got anything firmly in the calendar yet, but we're really looking forward to doing something for your members.
We can't wait. Thank you.
And I would urge you to get down there on the 26th of July, because that's my birthday.
Which is Shaw's birthday.
Which is Shaw's birthday. Alan, what have you chosen?
Well, I could do a little bit of having played the devil and Don Juan. Maybe I could do Eliza and Higgins from Pygmalion. And talking about that little bit that John Osborne was referencing about the iconic moment when Eliza throws the slippers at Higgins, and he, after they've succeeded in passing her off as a duchess, and he really can't understand why she feels abandoned, that now the experiment is over, they've made no provision for what she's going to do next. And so after some questioning, he says to her, well, don't you thank God it's all over? Now you can be free. I'll start again. Well, don't you thank God it's all over? Now you're free and can do what you like. And Eliza says, what am I fit for? What have you left me fit for? Where am I to go? What am I to do? What's to become of me? And Higgins says, oh, that's what's worrying you, is it? Well, I shouldn't bother about it if I were you. I should imagine you won't have much difficulty in settling yourself somewhere or other, though I hadn't quite realized that you were going away. You might marry, you know. You see, Eliza, all men are not confirmed old bachelors like me and the Colonel. Most men are the marrying sort, poor devils. And you're not bad-looking. It's quite a pleasure to look at you sometimes. Not now, of course, because you're crying and looking as ugly as the very devil. But when you're all right and quite yourself, you're what I should call attractive. That is, to the people in the marrying line, you understand. Now, you go to bed and have a good, nice rest, and then get up and look at yourself in the glass, and you won't feel so cheap. I dare say my mother could find some chap or other who would do very well. And then Liza says, we were above that at the corner of Tottenham Court Road. Higgins, what do you mean? I sold flowers. I didn't sell myself. Now you've made a lady of me, I'm not fit to sell anything else. I wish you'd left me where you found me. Oh, tosh, Eliza! Don't you insult human relations by dragging all this cant about buying and selling into it. You needn't marry the fellow if you don't like him. She says, well, what else am I to do? No, lots of things. What about your old idea of a florist shop? Pickering could set you up in one. He has lots of money. He'll have to pay for all those togs you've been wearing today, and that with the hire of the jewellery will make a big hole in £200. Why, 6 months ago you would have thought the millennium to have a flower shop of your own. Come, you'll be all right. I must clear off to bed. I'm devilish sleepy.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes. We'd like to thank all our guests today. We'd like to thank Alan Cox and Eoin O'Callaghan.